most of the principles that we have been looking at have been focused on the sort of why question, why are we doing what we're doing, which is all about purpose, or the where question, where's your prayer, which is all about prayer. And the rest of the principles that we will be doing from this point on for the next few, and will be focused on the who question. Who's on your team? Who are they? How are you choosing them? How are you growing them? And there's so much to say about this. We could fill our time between now and Christmas looking at this, but we only have time for 5 or 6 principles. We're going to scratch the surface as we do on most of this stuff. So far in Cultivate, we have focused mainly on Moses and on Gideon, but in this next bit, we are going to be looking at Jesus. About time, you might say. So we have 5 lessons, 5 very quick lessons on how Jesus, the Son of God, did his own leadership stuff. And lesson number 1 is Lone Ranger leadership is not an option in the kingdom of God. In the kingdom of God, you will not be asked to lead alone. Let me say this again. In the kingdom of God, you are never asked to lead alone. I honestly believe when we do this, we have strayed away from the biblical model. The times of catastrophic leadership in the whole biblical narrative mainly occurred in the times of the monarchy, which is classic Lone Ranger leadership. And every great leader, if they don't get it immediately, they get it at some point. Even Moses, one of the greats, reminded his leaders 3 times in Exodus 18, Numbers 11, Deuteronomy 1. 3 times he reminded his leaders that he sort of hit a wall, and he realized his Lone Ranger leadership wasn't working and he needed to sort of get a team. Jesus, because he was smarter than Moses, he got it straight away, immediately. In Matthew, he launched his vision, his mission in Matthew 4:12, and in Matthew 4:18, 6 verses later, he was calling his first leaders. In Mark, he launched his ministry in Mark 1:14. He called his leaders in Mark 1:16. In Luke, he launched his ministry in Luke 4. He called his leaders in Luke 5. His very first job in leadership was to gather a team. He didn't need to sort of hit a wall to sort it out. Lesson number 1, don't do it alone. Get others to join in your journey. Get a team with you. Lone Ranger leadership is not an option in the kingdom of God. Lesson number 2, pray, pray, pray. And this is so obvious that it nearly didn't get mentioned, but it's so obvious that sometimes it doesn't get done. In the next kind of few principles, we will be talking about ways in which we can help you think about gathering leaders, which ones are right for you. But please, for heaven's sake, without this thing, prayer, those pointers and models will be completely useless. God knows that you need other leaders to join with you on your journey. He will answer the prayer. You just need to do it. Jesus chose his 12 disciples in Luke 6:13. And what was he doing in Luke 6:12? He was praying all night. He said one of those days Jesus went out to a mountainside to pray and spent the night praying to God. When morning came, he called his disciples to him and chose 12 of them, whom he also designated apostles. I'll say no more. Leaders, you need them. You might need to go and get them, and you will definitely need to pray for them. Lesson number 3, we're just whizzing through these very quickly. Lesson number 3, start small. And this is a principle particularly for planters, for those who are starting new things. If you go with a call and not with a plan, which is how most pioneering journeys are, go with a small team. It is much, much easier to crystallize vision and to establish culture and to set foundations and to build community with a small group of people than it is with a large one. When we first planted Gateway, we went with a team of 25 people, and that had been whittled down from a group of 40 people that were interested. I thought we had done well to whittle down to 25. I wished we had done more sort of whittling. As soon as you reach a certain kind of critical mass, the work of vision can be overwhelmed by the sort of work of pastoring. Our team was small enough so that I couldn't delegate pastoral responsibilities, but it was big enough to overwhelm the foundational work that we needed to actually to put in place. Jesus picked 12 people to launch his mission, his movement. He did it for several reasons, one of them theological, of course, but he also knew that 12 was a pretty effective number for a team beginning a pioneering journey, which is what they were sort of doing. Pick a team, but start small. But even Jesus found that the next lesson was true, and that was lesson number 4. Invest heavily in your leaders, your sort of group of your sort of team. As a leader, you will spend a lot of time, hopefully, investing in a small group of leaders, and that is good. Jesus spent an enormous amount of time focusing while he was on earth, establishing and enabling and teaching his disciples, his small group of leaders, his next leaders in mission. Somebody who studied the Gospels meticulously worked out that Jesus spent 73% of his time teaching and discipling and building up his small group of 12 disciples. 73%, nearly 3/4 of his time. The people who lead effective movements model this principle of Jesus. Those disciples of Jesus, they frustrated him. They were flawed in character. They were slow in understanding. They were ultimately self-seeking and disloyal. But he loved them. He loved them, and he invested heavily in them, and so must we. 4 lessons. The 5th and final lesson. The vision is usually given to one. The plan is always given to many. We've got 4 lessons from Jesus as a leadership, and this lesson number 5 is a crucial one. Time and time again, it appears when God looks to begin a journey, when he gets a movement going, when he calls a leader, he calls a planter, he initiates a call, and he deposits a vision. And he usually does it with individuals. Over and over again, his pattern seems to be initiate a journey, call a leader, deposit a call, deposit a vision, and let them go. If you gather a team before you have a vision, I think it's called a committee, and we know what happens with those. Sometimes a couple of people have a vision that runs simultaneously, and they could complement and run with it with each other. But the biblical model appears to actually be call a leader, call a planter, deposit a vision. But one reason you quickly need to gather a team around it is that vision is given to one, but the plan, how it's going to work out, is given to many, many people. Once your team grasp hold of this vision and are captivated by it, let them run with it and mold it and own it. And Jesus in Matthew 28, when he delivered his famous talk that he had been building up to for kind of 3 years, when he gave them the vision for the church, he didn't tell them how to do it. Throughout his 3 years on earth, and sort of culminating in Matthew 28, Jesus was massively interested in 2 things that we will speak more about later, and they were vision and culture. But if you notice, no plans. He didn't give them any plans. He didn't tell them how they were going to go from Jerusalem to Judea to the ends of the earth. He just told them, that's where you're going, friends. He spent 3 years telling his next leaders in mission where they were going, which is vision, and what they were meant to be like as they go, which is culture. But he didn't tell them any plans. That was for them to work out. The vision is usually given to one. The plan is given to many people. And in the last session of Cultivate, principle number 24, we will be looking at the dark side of leadership and looking at 5 sort of different descriptions of dark sides of leaders. And one of them is the compulsive leader. And part of the outworking of that is control, needing to have control, to keep control of things. And if Moses had a dark side at all, it appears to possibly be this. And many leaders demonstrate this need for control, this unhealthy desire for it. And we will unpack this, of course, at greater length. But those leaders forget that their job as a leader and planter is to discern and to communicate vision. Its outworking is the job of many, many people. The job of a leader, of a planter, is to hold tightly to a vision, but hold loosely to our plans. Plans change according to seasons and circumstance. Vision does not. So the team is massively important. It's massively important to sort of remember that Lone Ranger leadership is not an option in the kingdom of God. To pray, to start small, to invest heavily in your leaders. And the vision is given to one, but the plan is given to many.